I'm going to call to order the Independent School District number 283 School Board meeting for December 9th, 2019 at 7 o'clock. Thank everybody for being here. And we are going to start with a spotlight. And our Superintendent, Aston Osai, will lead the way.
Good evening, Chair Gores, members of the board. This evening I'm honored to get a chance to introduce the spotlight for our meeting. And this evening we have the honor of really acknowledging the tremendous contribution of 3 school board members here in St. Louis Park Public Schools. Earlier this evening, our school board members had a chance to share their thoughts and appreciation for our outgoing school board members, Jim Beneke, Joe Tatalovich, and Nancy Gores. And we heard not only from current board members, but past board members and newly elected school board members as well. And the theme that we heard from each person that had an opportunity to share was just their overall gratitude and appreciation for the contribution of Joe, Nancy, and Jim over their combined 28 years of service. I am, as the superintendent of the school district, extremely honored and thankful to have worked for each of you and to have worked with you. As I shared earlier, each of you embody and hold the qualities of some of the finest leaders I've ever had a chance to work with. And I know that I'm a better leader for that, and I'm confident that our school district is better for your service here in St. Louis Park Public Schools. At our spotlight tonight, we're going to create an opportunity for each outgoing board member to share a few words or multiple words. I don't know how many words they have planned, but to share a little bit, because as you think about a combined 28 years of service to St. Louis Park Public Schools, there's a lot of experience here, and there's a lot of work that's been done over the years to meet the needs of all of our students and families. So shortly I'll be inviting board member Jim Beneke to come up to the podium, and I know this is different than you normally address from the table, but I'm going to ask that you come up, and if you would be willing to just share a few words about your experience, we would greatly appreciate it. And each school board member will be receiving a plaque that just is an appreciation for their years of outstanding leadership to the St. Louis Park Public Schools. So if you could please join me in welcoming Jim.
Thank you. It's tough for me to say goodbye to the school board. Even though I've only been a school board member for 4 years compared to Joe's 8 and Nancy's 16, it seems like it's been a lot longer than that. Maybe because before I became a school board member, I spent many years bringing complaints, feedback to the school board. They heard from me a lot. I was also on many committees before becoming a school board member. In fact, I named the committee, and I've probably been on it. So it seems like I've been involved for at least 10 years. It's been a pleasure serving. It's been a pleasure serving in this community, a community that really values the well-being of every child. One thing that always kind of brings home what the community values here is the mission statement. You know, from the day it was introduced, several people thought it was too long, but we just wanted to accomplish so much. No one ever thought of a way to reduce the size of it. Maybe I'll just read it once because it really impresses me, and since it is so long, I don't even have it memorized, so I'll have to read it here. But as a caring, diverse community with the tradition of putting children first, we will ensure all students attain their highest level of achievement, prepare all students to contribute to society, offer high-quality opportunities for lifelong learning, provide multiple pathways to excellence, challenge all learners to meet high standards, and provide a safe and nurturing environment that energizes and enhances the spirit. And it seems like everyone involved in the school district, community, staff, administration, and school board members all really strive to accomplish all of that mission. So my thanks to this wonderful community. and my thanks to the wonderful and dedicated administrative staff that the school district has. It is hard for me to say goodbye. Perhaps I will stay involved with the school district. Perhaps I'll be volunteering with other organizations around St. Louis Park. But either way, I pledge my support to the future endeavors of St. Louis Park Schools.
Jim, I appreciate your comments, and certainly it is hard to say goodbye. You see how he tried to leave the plaque behind, right? That was just a way of like, hey, it's not over yet. But thank you for your comments. And at this time, I would like to welcome Board Member Joe Tatalovich.
All right. I was told earlier tonight that I was funny, but what I wrote down was earnest, so I apologize for maybe being earnest. I'm incredibly grateful for my family, the board, the staff, and the community. I've learned so much from all of you. When I started, my son, Eli, was 3, and my daughter, Emma, was 1. You saw them downstairs. They're now 11 and 9. Over the years, I've heard a lot of, "Daddy, are you going to a meeting?" And I had to say, "Yeah, I'm going to a meeting." And although they notice less that I'm gone, I certainly notice what I've missed. I think Anne may have noticed sitting next to me all of the texts that I get from my wife, Molly, that show my kids sledding, and playing tennis and enjoying the weather and themselves as we're sitting here in this windowless room that we've sat in many, many times. So I don't want to continue missing those things. There's a lot of things that I'd like to do with my family. That being said, the 8 years that I've spent on the board have been really rewarding, and I'm really glad that I did this. I'm honored that the community has voted me in a couple times, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished. But obviously, there's more work to be done. I think this board, this superintendent, and this staff here in the room, and all the teachers throughout the district are really up to this task. There's one common element that I see, and I have seen throughout St. Louis Park schools, that really shows them and us at our best. And that's that no matter where we're at and what we're doing, we always challenge ourselves to be better. And I've seen this countless times, both in this board, in these board meetings and out in the district. I've heard about the struggling student just trying to graduate and people getting him or her across the finish line. I've heard about so many students taking AP and IB courses and really challenging themselves, and us as an institution opening up those classes and those exams to more and more students over the years. I've heard about the IB diploma candidate students working their way to try to get into an Ivy League school, or Stanford, or a great school like Northwestern, for example. I'm sorry. You know, I've heard about it through all of our sports teams. I think it might have been the lacrosse team one year was playing at the club level, and they were cleaning up, and they distinctly challenged themselves to go to a varsity level sport, even though they knew they'd probably take a few losses there, but they knew that challenging themselves was the right thing to do. And I've heard the orchestra director, the band director, the choir director all say, "We chose this piece because it challenges us." It's not easy to do. We might get judged harder on it. We may not do as well in the competition, but we want to challenge ourselves. So that's the thing that I've seen over the years that's really affirms my belief in this district and the people in this community, is the fact that we always want to strive to make ourselves better. And as I leave the board and the new board members come aboard, we continue to have the same great superintendent and the continuing board members as well. I think we're in good hands, and we're going to continue to challenge ourselves to do better, narrow the achievement gap, make strides in racial equity and gender inclusion. So once again, thank you all on the board and the superintendent and the staff, both here in the room and out in the schools, for everything you've done for me over the last 8 years. Thank you.
Next, I would like to invite Nancy up, and as Nancy Gores, our current board chair, comes up, I would just like to echo the sentiments of board member Tatalovich, particularly the piece around the challenge. And I often reflect and am thankful to work in an environment where I have the permission and responsibility to lead courageously around some of the most difficult challenges that school districts all across this nation face. So I thank you, and I thank each of you for providing us not only the responsibility but the permission to do it in a way that is equitable and that is courageous. So thank you for that. And at this time, if you could join me in welcoming Nancy Gores.
Thank you, Aston. You know, it's hard to believe that it's been 16 years. I mean, I'm just shocked when I think about that. I'm going to first, before I get going, thank my family for showing up here. They were there knocking on doors and handing out leaflets and helping make it all happen back in the days 16 years ago. 16 years ago, my son, that was 2004, Jacob, my son, Wood, was 12 years old. He's now 28 years old. He was in middle school back then. He is a graduate of Park from 2010. He is a Michigan Tech College grad. He's employed. He's living in Washington, D.C. He votes, and he's in love. So I don't know how it gets any better than that. And I think I say all that because I'm proud as a mother, but I also think that's one of many examples of how our students live out our mission as they leave us. And that life of fulfilling their dreams is why we do this work. It's what we're here for. It's what's embedded in our mission. And I think that we have worked hard to do it over the past years, and the new board and the continuing board and our current superintendent will do a great job going forward. I just have no doubts about that. Why does somebody do this for any period of time, let alone 16 years? I think it's, one, because of the mission. It's what we believe in. Public education makes all the difference, and we need to work to keep it strong and effective and good for our students. The other reason is our students. We have such amazing students. I am just blown away every time they come in here, every time they talk to us, every time we hear them at commencement and attend their activities. Year after year, they just knock our socks off. And, you know, I have one son, but I have 4,500 children every year. And it's just a joy, and has been, to work for them. The third reason to continue to do this work, in my opinion, is my fellow board members. Over the years, I have just been so blessed, as has this community, to work with amazing board members. Everyone who's come on this board has had multiple strengths, but usually a particular strength that you kind of see come out over time as they're on the board. And those strengths blend themselves together and help us do really good collaborative work together. And I could list those particular strengths that people have, but I won't, because we have a meeting to get to later on. But trust me, I've seen them, I know what they are, and we are so lucky to have each of you with us. And I've listened to the new board members. I have a hint about what your new strengths are going to be as they play themselves out on the board. I've had the joy, really, of working with 5 superintendents over 16 years. Cindy Bennett, who was our executive secretary for years, is here and has worked with several of them. When I came on the board, it was Dr. Barbara Pulliam. At my first board meeting, she announced she was moving on to another district. And we then had an interim in Dan Walker. We then had Dr. Deborah Bowers, who really led us through some very difficult financial challenges in those difficult recession years, and she did a great job. Hard to do. You're not always well loved when you're doing the hard work, but she did the hard work and helped lead us in doing that. Then we had Rob Metz, and Rob had been in-house as an elementary principal, not a high school principal, and became our superintendent. And he brought his in-house knowledge, the relationships he'd built over the years, and this amazing emotional intelligence to go with his smarts. And he really was the right guy at the right time for what this district needed. We now have Aston Osai. I tell you, I almost didn't leave the board. I almost ran again. Sorry to the few folks. I almost ran again because it's such a joy to work with Aston. He's just a treat. He is caring. He is smart. He has this insight for how to make the system sustainable changes work, and that's what we're hoping to do here as a board. It's just, this district is in such good hands. I hope that it appreciates Aston and what he brings to the table for us. And these are not in order, by the way, except the students was first on purpose. Fifth, it's our teachers and our staff. My dear friend and a teacher in a district is here tonight, and I know there are many teachers in the district that I know and have come to care for over the years. They are so forgiving. They go to bat with every initiative we ask them to do. And sometimes they work, and sometimes they need some help, and sometimes we need to rethink them. But the teachers hang in there with us, and they do the work every day when they show up with our students, and they make the difference in the classroom. So I am so grateful for their support over the years. Without them, this just would not work in any way, shape, or form. And last, I want to really say that you couldn't do this work if you didn't have a community that supports us. And the St. Louis Park community is the best that there is. They care passionately about education. They let us know that. But with the exception of one phone call over 16 years, they've always let us know that in a very constructive, caring way. And you can't have a perfect at-bat. And they care about young people, they care about education, and they put their money where their mouth is. I don't know where else you could be in this district and have referendums passed by 85% and 81% of the whole community. It's an amazing place. It's the right size. It's the right people. And it has just been a great joy, an honor, and a privilege, truly, to serve on this board for 16 years. I could talk about the accomplishments, but Joe really did a nice job of that. And I don't think our focus should be on the past. I think our focus needs to be on our present and our future. So you've got this. Thank you for letting me serve.
And at this time, I'm going to ask Sarah, I'm believing that we should get a picture with the 3 board members. Can do that. So I don't know where the best place to take that picture would be. Any family or friends, if you would like to take a picture, I would love to get a picture with the 3 of you so that we can make sure that we keep this memory and certainly share it with your friends and family. Is there a particular place?
I mean, Flower really upped our game, so we're grateful.
Come in front.
Oh.
Sarah's back. I know, right? Do you want this light off here? No, if they're in front of it, it'll be great.
Do you want me in it? Or
I do want you in it.
And you guys, family and friends can take photos too.
Okay.
We always say that to her. Thank you, Sarah.
I know. There you go. Remember to look at me first, then you can look at everybody else. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. And that concludes our spotlight for this evening, so you're more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, and if you're not interested in doing that, you're
Exciting as the first part?
yeah. It depends on who you ask. It depends on who you ask. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. It's such a pleasure to see you, Cindy. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and we totally understand you're leaving. Love only goes so far.
Congratulations, everybody.
I think putting through one truth and taxation hearing for you says a lot about it.
Does. I think it does. Deep affection that they sat through the truth and taxation. So now we're going to call our meeting to, first I'm going to say thank you on behalf of the board. That was really lovely, you guys, downstairs and up here. So thank you so much for tonight. And so now I'm going to call our meeting to order. First, we have approval of the agenda. It is recommended that the school board approve the agenda for December 9, 2019 as presented. We have open forum. We have the superintendent's report. We have discussion items, the enrollment report, review of the 2020, 2021, and 2021, 2022 school calendar options, advanced placement and international baccalaureate participation report, policy development first reading 545 Park Spanish immersion admission, policy development second reading 706 acceptance of donation and gifts. Then we have the consent agenda, followed by our action agenda. On the action agenda is the employment agreement for an aquatics supervisor, polling place resolution, final levy certification, approval of the 2020-2021 school calendar, approval of second reading of policy 706, acceptance of donation and gifts, communications and transmittals, and adjournment. Let me just ask, we're only doing the one calendar, is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. 2020, 2021? Okay. And then we have adjournment. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? So moved. Is moved by Karen. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Ann. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion carries 7-0. Now tonight, from a technical point of view, we have one microphone, so I don't want that to inhibit anybody who wants to speak. You just need to make sure you get recognized, and we'll pass it down the line, okay? So first up, we have open forum. Anybody want to speak at open forum? Nope. Okay, moving right along, we're up to the I laugh because we have our candidates who are elected and they're starting in January here, and they're going to hold all their comments to when they're on the board. Next up, it's Aston Osai with a report.
Good evening, Chair Gores, members of the board. This evening, I have a couple of informational items that I would like to share. And the first couple of items are connected to strategy 1 of our strategic plan. And I would like to just take a moment to thank all of our staff that came together of last Friday, and we engaged in a day-long professional development connected to culturally relevant pedagogy. And I would like to acknowledge Dr. Adrian Dixon from the University of Illinois, who was with us and who took us deeper along the journey. And I look forward to our continued work with Dr. Dixon and Dr. Latson-Billings, and really just want to thank all of our staff. You know, as we continue to go deeper in the area of culturally relevant instruction, it becomes harder and harder because we're starting to, remove all of the layers and really get down to the core of what is going to be required to meet the needs of all of our learners. So thank you to Dr. Dixon. Thank you to all of our staff who participated in the great day of learning. The next item that I would like to just mention a little bit about is connected to some of the work coming out of our business innovation pop-up shops here at the high school. And I heard during the spotlight, each of you talk about our mission and our organization. And within that mission and organization, we talk about providing multiple pathways or multiple opportunities for our students to demonstrate their brilliance. And the pop-up shops that are coming up through our business innovation courses are opportunities for students to develop business plans and start their own companies. And each company is responsible for selling products or services that solve a problem in which they've identified. On Friday, at the actual professional development session, students set up tables and had a chance to interact with staff and sell their product. There'll be, and if you didn't get a chance to be there on Friday, no worries. There'll be an opportunity. There'll be multiple opportunities coming up here. The pop-up shops will be available here in C350 on December 10th from 4 to 7:30 p.m. and on December 14th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. here at the high school in room C350. So if you're interested in learning more about the products and services that our students have developed and are selling through their business innovation class, please come out and join them at that time. I would like to take a moment to just acknowledge, so I should probably back up and say that I don't for one second take for granted the outstanding music program that we have here in St. Louis Park Public Schools. I recognize in the day and age in which school districts all across this country are having to cut programs, particularly in the area of arts, I continue to be thankful for the tremendous programs that we have here, and last week was no exception. Last week we had 3 amazing concerts starting on Monday, where our 9th grade band and jazz ensemble performed. On Tuesday, our high school symphonic band performed, and I think it was Thursday, correct me, Thursday, in which our middle school 7th and 8th grade bands had a concert. And I always love seeing the progression of our students as they matriculate through our music program, and our director, Steve Schmitz, does a wonderful job, and I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge their contribution to our school community. And the last thing I just wanted to mention as a reminder is that winter break, and today with the snow falling, it is certainly letting us know that it's approaching, will be December 23rd through January 1st. And the reason that I'm including this in my spotlight is that this is a sort of a change in our normal 2-week winter break pattern. So please remember that school resumes on Thursday, January 2nd, and that we look forward to seeing all of your rested, smiling faces for the start of school on Thursday. Thank you, and that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Superintendent. So our first discussion item is the enrollment report. Again, it's Patricia Magnuson, Director of Business Services.
Good evening, Chair Gores, Superintendent Osai, and board members. Tonight I'll be presenting an enrollment update in alignment with Policy 545. So the purpose of the presentation, there are really 3. To provide an update regarding our fall 2019 K-12 enrollment, just to provide another update yet for this year. And then the quote is out of Policy 545 to submit an enrollment report to the board by June 30th of each year, and then to foreshadow our kindergarten preparation for the class of 2033, which will be next fall's kindergarten class. So first of all, our fiscal year 2020 enrollment. This school year, our enrollment continues to outpace trends and projections that we had anticipated for this year. So you can see that in total, we have 4,609 students, and this is as of November 1st. The last time I was before the board, we were doing an October 1st update. This probably better reflects some of the corrections that have been made in some of our reporting errors, so 4,609. What I want you to notice again is the kindergarten class. So if you go to the first column all the way to the bottom under K, our total kindergarten class is 309 students, and that's 60 students larger than first grade. Right now, that's the largest class in our school district, so that's very good news for St. Louis Park Public Schools. The next slide, so if you look at all of these cells, you notice, like if you go to Aquila Kindergarten, the upper left-hand corner, there's 110 students in the class. So the next slide just says, how does that compare to what we thought we were going to have this fall? And our budget and our projections are based off of trends. So this tells you just what the difference is from trends and projections. So that same 110 students, it's 19 higher than we had projected we would have for this fall at Aquila Kindergarten, for instance. So if you look at this page, everything that's shaded in green means that that cell is 5 students or more above what we projected. Everything that's shaded in blue means that it was 5 students or more below projections, and then any number on the thing, if it's bracketed, it means it was below projections. So there's lots of good news on this page, and first of all, that kindergarten, if you go to the bottom, is 40 students more than we had projected. So not only is it the largest class in the district, it's also outpacing what any projection would have told us about capture rates and birth rates for kindergarten for this past fall that we're experiencing. And then in total, we are up by 54 students. So if you go all the way to the bottom right-hand corner, at K-12, we are up by 54 students. And that's about 1.5%, which is great for St. Louis Park Public Schools. It has a positive impact all around, telling us that this is a school district of choice for our residents, especially in St. Louis Park, and it will have a positive impact on our revenue. The second part of the presentation is really an update about the Park Spanish Immersion applicant numbers. And what I'm going to be doing is reflecting back on last year's applicant numbers and those that were placed in seats that were available for this fall as we approach that process again coming up later this winter. This first slide summarizes the initial fall 2019 applications that were accepted. So when we ran our computer-generated acceptance process, these were the students that were accepted at that time. So what we're showing here are the number of students, what category they fell into, and then how that's associated with policy 545.
So Patricia, you mean these were when they're accepted back in February of
Yes.
2019?
Yes.
And
they are this year's kindergarten class at
that
Park
showed up in
Spanish Immersion.
September.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. So there were 36 students that were siblings, and these are resident students, which is a part of our policy. There were 29 resident students that were selected through that computer-generated process, also a part of our policy. There were 16 students in that initial process that were parts of the seats that were held for those students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. That included both resident and non-resident students. There are 7 students that were placed because they were resident or non-resident students of staff members. That's not in policy, but it's a practice that we have in the district. It's a common practice in other school districts, and it's also one of the items that sits in state law when open enrollment is discussed in state law. Staff member students is part of that process. And we also have one student that we place through policy that's an open enrolled student, and that student happens to be a sibling. So that student was chosen as one of the siblings that is open enrolled. So in total, we initially accepted 89 students, and of course we were holding space at that time for other free and reduced applicants. This slide tells you a little bit about where our resident students are coming from, what boundary areas or school attendance areas our students are coming from. In kindergarten through 5th grade at Park Spanish Immersion by elementary school. So Aquila, obviously the largest school in the district, but 184 students at PSI are from the Aquila attendance area. The Peter Hobart attendance area has 140 students, and Susan Lindgren has 115. So that's just a summary of that information by grade and by school. This is a little bit of history because one of the policy components that the board is looking at is students who qualify for free and reduced meals. This shows a little bit of history about students up through fiscal year 2019. So this is last year actual. We aren't able yet to report for this year's student count. But we've included here also the middle school and the high school and then a district-wide number to give some context around the number of students or the percentage of students who are enrolled at all of our schools that qualify for free and reduced meals. And then finally, we are preparing for the class of 2033. And all of our schools have been underway welcoming families, and we've been making preparations already for next fall. So, and that's the end of the presentation. I wanted to tell you, I thought I had another slide, but what I want to tell you is, I thought there was another slide, but looking ahead, okay. What we know so far is that we have 594 resident students in our current census that we have been actively communicating with in St. Louis Park Public Schools. There are 594. We've been holding tours at all of our elementary schools, at each of our elementary schools, and folks can sign up online to schedule a tour with a principal or other staff member at all of our elementary schools. And a kindergarten information guide will be mailed this month, if it hasn't gone out already, with a lot of detailed information about what parents can expect in kindergarten in St. Louis Park. And we did already hold an information night at Park Spanish Immersion, which was well attended, to give those families who want to be in that computer-generated selection process some information that they need for that. And we are holding an information night at all of our elementary schools on March 12th of 2020. So that is our update then for enrollment for this year.
Anyone have any questions? Yeah, Joel.
Thanks for the presentation. So on the PSI numbers, a clarification on the staff number, that the children of staff is district-wide staff, correct? Not just PSI staff?
That's right, district-wide staff members, yes.
Okay.
Thank you for that
Thank you.
clarification.
And on your numbers, on the there's 594 potential kindergartners for next year, correct?
That we have in our census. There's
our
probably
census.
others out there that we do not have in our census that I hope will also connect with us.
And currently we have the biggest kindergarten, 392. And if our marketing's really, really good, then we could have potential of over 400 coming next year
That's right, that's right.
with no capacity.
That would be a problem we would love to solve.
We would love to solve. Yes, you're absolutely correct. And it would be definitely a problem that we'd love to have. But the potential is there, right?
That's right. That's right.
I just have a quick question about the free and reduced slide, because I know this is probably something that we'll talk about with regard to the policy, the PSI policy, and I wasn't around when that policy first came out. So I just want to make sure I understand. We started making a kind of more concerted effort to capture more free and reduced paperwork over the last couple of years. Is that correct?
That's correct. What I'm familiar with is the efforts that we've been making for this year, and that data is not reflected here yet.
Okay.
What I do know anecdotally from the Child Nutrition Department is that we're ahead of pace on the number of applicants that have come in. Now, whether we'll end up with a higher number of those that qualify, because we now have an online method of applying for free and reduced meals.
Okay, so this increase that we're seeing here in most places and overall is before that effort kind of really became.
And I think there have been efforts underway even before just what I'm familiar
over
with
the
this
years,
year.
for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Patricia, I just had a couple of questions on the PSI enrollment. I think you said we filled originally in February 16. We hold 20 seats for free and reduced lunch students, and you said we filled 16 of those in February. Did we fill the next 4 by the time? How did we do by the time school started in September with those remaining 4 seats?
Right, we did not fill the remaining seats. And so those then are filled with other students that are on the wait list at that time.
And then I didn't see their report on any, what we used to call Choice is Yours. We're now, I think, calling them students receiving desegregation transportation.
Those are included in the free and reduced numbers. There are 4 students included.
4? And they're included in that
They're
number?
included in that total.
And then I just wanted to, when we look at the chart for Park Spanish Immersion and the resident school district that that's the one, thank you. I think that's the one I mean. I'm just going to suggest it might be helpful to see that with 1 or 2 or 3 years of trend data since we've just relocated PSI up to Cedar Manor. It might be helpful to see if that impacts at all the distribution of students that we get, and if that may inform some policy that we may or may not need to do going forward.
Absolutely.
Because we don't have capacity if they all, I mean, the pool is pretty full. We want more students, we'll solve that problem, but we just need to understand how that's going to, how that change in location will play out.
I will do that.
So Patricia, when we look at the, I think it's the previous slide, there's 43 remaining on the wait list as of earlier in the month.
Mm-hmm.
There is something, and we'll discuss this in policy a little bit later, it's called a lateral inclusion. So maybe a child did kindergarten in a different location, but there is a potential that they could come back to PSI as a first grader or at a different grade level. But that 43 remaining on the wait list, do we make a concerted effort to track where the children went? Did they stay in our district or did they leave our district? Because that is a significant amount of, frankly, revenue sitting out there on a wait list.
I don't have an answer to that, but I will see if I can find out, unless the superintendent knows more about that.
Great. Thank you, Patricia.
Mm-hmm.
Really appreciate that update. What's next? Oh, calendar, Mr. Cryer. It would not be a good final on-camera meeting for us if we didn't get to talk about the camera. Right, Joe and Jim? I like it.
He wants the support.
The discussion of the single most important instructional tool in St. Louis Park. Yeah. We have gathered more information. Would like to bring back to the board an option for your consideration and action tonight, and then some discussion about the 2021 calendar. And the board asked us to bring back an option where we wouldn't start on the Tuesday after Labor Day because of the first day of the Rosh Hashanah holiday. And so we do have an option for you to review tonight, and then we can take action at the next meeting in January. So with that, again, just a reminder, this is the calendar that we all have looked at many, many times and was approved last January as kind of a placeholder for this fall. We're bringing this calendar back to you, but with this slight option to not hold school on Election Day, given a number of construction pieces on our side, the high volume of probably anticipated voters, and there's just the ability for us to get people in and out with the way the schools will be under construction, and the change that now 2 more of our schools won't be polling places, and some of our schools will be. And so, with all of with all that, we have this option for the board to consider, and that would, if I could point, that would be awesome. But in November, what we would end up doing is the November 2nd, it would be a grading and reporting day for secondary. It would be a professional development day for elementary. We would have a professional development day for all staff on Tuesday the 3rd, and that professional development day that happens on Tuesday the 3rd will have been moved from December 4th back over to November 3rd. And so that's the moving parts in this calendar. And no,
That's good.
none?
And I should just add, I'm here for support.
Thank you.
Rick does this every year, and I told him that I would stand behind him and with him as we share this evening.
I also want to note that Matt Thomas took the calendar to DPAC, did a great job. So, any questions on this proposed? This is the administration's recommended 2021 calendar.
Oh, sorry.
One thing we talked about last time was if we were pushing back the start of school, or just in general, the reasoning for doing the kindergarten start a couple days later. I think what we had talked about, but it wasn't fully confirmed, is that we do that in order to have the parents meet with the teacher at the beginning, and that facilitates that. Is that first of all, is that why we're doing it, and second of all, do we need to be doing that?
It's at least partially true, and yes, we so what I mean by that is we believe that it facilitates the start of the kindergartners to have some home visits and connections between the new parent and the kindergarten teachers and the paraprofessionals and people who will be working with the students. Usually the parents come in, they do like a dry run, they learn where boots, hats, mittens, coats, and things get put, and the kindergartner feels more at ease having kind of run through that, and then the teachers being met, and all of that makes it a nicer start. Second, we don't end up with the kindergartners on their first day on the bus with all of the people and just kind of just lost in the big fray. So they get their own day one start 2 days later, or next year we would propose still doing it 1 day later, so that the kindergartners get their day one all to themselves.
Okay, thanks. My 5th and 3rd grader don't know where to put their coat, boots,
We'll have to send them back through.
bags, etc.
Okay.
Thanks, Rick. I think we have no more questions on the
that one, and then
2020,
we-
2021.
So.
Oh, well, let me just ask, did you review that with PAT or any other feedback for that calendar?
Yes, we went back through with PAT, and PAT talked with members and their executive committee. They acknowledge that there is no perfect calendar, and there are pluses and minuses to all of the moves we make, and depending upon when you survey people, they'll be different. If you survey people just before winter break, winter break's the most important thing. If you surveyed them in May, getting out earlier is the most important thing. So they realize that it's emotional, and so they concur that this is a good option for, and it's an interesting option to have the PD days back to back and the time concentrated. They're interested in giving it a try, and so we're interested in proposing it to the board.
Thank you.
The next option that we would like you to consider, at least for tonight, and discuss, and we can bring this back for action, is the 21-22 calendar, so not this coming falls, but then a year from fall. And what we're looking at is if we didn't start on the Tuesday, and we're constrained by wanting to make sure we have 171 days of instruction and 185 work days for teachers, how would we do all of those things? And what we are proposing, at least at this point looking at, is the teachers would not have opening week start on Monday. They would come back on Tuesday, and they would conclude that opening workshop week on the Tuesday the 7th. Most of the Friday events, that would be teachers doing last-minute touch-ups and fixing rooms and getting ready for the students to come, could still take place on Monday, and teachers would be available Monday if there were calls and things for kindergarten homes. We would do our best to work on an event for the kindergartners on the 8th, and then the kindergartners would come on the 9th. That leaves pretty much the rest of the calendar intact, and it still allows us to have students done by the 10th. We looked at and talked with the teachers about having that day in June. If you look, there's a brown colored day, which would be the last grading and reporting, closing up your room day on that Monday, the 11th. The teachers feel it's more important to have the students done by Friday and not, hang over on Monday or Tuesday. They understand, and it's happened in the past, and they will work with that to make sure that the students are out by Friday.
I was afraid that Superintendent Osai was standing up there as your bodyguard and not your support system when you were keeping the teachers until the following Monday. I am incredibly grateful, actually, to the teachers for being willing to kind of extend their year through that weekend, because I just feel it's really important to start school this year on that 8th, on the Wednesday. It doesn't sit right with me for us to be an inclusive community that asks such a large portion of our population to sacrifice the sense of community and school spirit and team building that happen on that first day of school. And again, for people who may be tuning in at home, we are talking about delaying the first day of school until Wednesday because Rosh Hashanah, which is a very important holiday in the Jewish calendar, happens to fall on Tuesday of the day after Labor Day for 2021. And we have well over 100 students who would miss the very first day of school. And I think particularly for our 6th graders and our 9th graders and any of our students coming in, transferring, for example, from the Jewish Day School, that would be just a challenge that doesn't seem fair. So I thank you so much, Rick, for your work and coming up with an alternative for this. I like it, and I just want to stress how grateful I am to the teachers for being willing. It seems like that's kind of the biggest change, is that extension of their school year from Friday to Monday. And so I'm grateful for their willingness to do so.
And Mary, I think you educated me, at least at our last meeting, that while Rosh Hashanah is a multi-day religious holiday, the first day is really an important part of that, and so that's why we really are feeling it's important to accommodate so many students on that first day of school and on that first day of Rosh Hashanah.
Sure, that's my understanding too, as a non-Jewish person who is a member of a Jewish family. Certainly there are some of our more conservative Jewish community, who would celebrate for all 3 days. But this feels like the compromise that would assist the greatest amount of people.
Rick, I'm not seeing any more questions here. Did you say everything you needed to say?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. And next up, we have report on the advanced placement and international baccalaureate participation by our superintendent, Aston Osai.
Good evening, Chair Gores, members of the board. This evening, I would like to provide an overview of advanced placement and international baccalaureate course participation. And as a part of our mission, we strive to ensure all students achieve their highest level of achievement, and certainly we prepare students to contribute to society and try to offer students multiple pathways in order to do so. And we look at advanced placement and international baccalaureate options as one of those pathways that students may take here in St. Louis Park Public Schools. So for the purpose of this evening is just to provide an update regarding student participation, and the majority of this will focus on participation, and there'll be a little bit of information in this presentation that will look at student success in the courses that they're taking. So this first slide shows over the past several years an overall increase in the number of AP and IB courses taken by students. And what I want to acknowledge here is that as you look at 2019, 2020, that there were over 4,000 or 4,100 courses taken. That means that certainly we don't have 4,100 students taking courses, but this accounts for all of the students that may be taking multiple AP and or IB courses. And you'll see, there was a steady increase up until 2017-18, in which we had a slight reduction in a couple hundred courses reduction. I've not yet been able to determine what caused that reduction, but then the following year that course participation went back up. And as part of our work here in St. Louis Park Public Schools, we're really working to ensure that our courses, our achievement is not racial demographically, predictable. And what you'll see here is that there's a similar pattern from the overall course participation, and also as we look at it disaggregated by students of color. So you'll see that same increase up until 2017-18, and then the decline in 18-19, and then the resurgence back in 19-20. What I do not include as a part of this presentation, and if you're interested, I can certainly provide more detailed data, is a breakdown by course. So we have the data collected, broken down by course, and can see trends in which students are taking which courses, which really allows us internally to learn more about why some students, particularly some students of color, may be taking certain APRIB courses and not others. And we're starting to really investigate and unpack that data more. So there's a piece about students taking courses, and then particularly with IB, each student has an opportunity to take a rigorous exam at the end of that course. And what you'll see here is 3 years of data around student participation in taking either one or more exam. And the highest participation in the exam that we had in the last 3 years was in 17-18. And in 2019, we're projected to have that number start to increase again. In 18-19, we were down to 172 exams taken. And I don't have data to suggest the reason for the change in students taking exams. What we recognize is that each year there are different cohorts of students taking these courses, and some of that may be part of why, in 17-18 there was a higher number compared to 18-19, and then what we're projecting for this school year. So in a very similar fashion, as we think about the students taking exams, we also really want to look at, so how does that reflect from a standpoint of students of color taking exams here in St. Louis Park? And what we're seeing is some incremental change over the last 3 years, increasing participation around exams. So not only are more students of color taking IB courses, but they're also taking the exams associated with the IB courses. Another area around where we've seen some increase, and unfortunately I don't have access to this data disaggregated by race, but what we've seen over the past 3 years is an increase in the percentage of students passing the AP exam. And I think this is something that we should really be proud of and celebrate, because these are rigorous exams, and students, as they pass these exams, are able to earn college credit. And what we've seen over the last 3 years that we've seen, and as I stated earlier about the incremental increase, I would suggest that this is some significant increase in the percentage of students passing exams who take them. So, oftentimes school districts in the state of Minnesota are measured by scores on standardized tests, and what was not often enough do school districts get a chance to be recognized for students that are performing very well on rigorous exams. And to suggest that last school year, or that we had almost 70% of the students who took an AP exam pass, that's significant, and I want to applaud our staff and our students for that tremendous accomplishment, because that just doesn't happen. And I would also suggest that as we look at the trends of students taking AP and IB courses, the course participation increasing, and that the trajectory of students of color increasing as well is something else to celebrate. And this just doesn't happen by chance or accident. This happens through some very intentional effort. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of that effort. So there are some things that we've done here, and I've talked to Jenny Magdahl here at the high school, who's our PD coordinator and IB coordinator, and she shared a little bit about some of the work that they're intentionally doing to impact the systemic change that you're seeing in the data that I just shared. And there are things like looking at the course sequence and how we're offering courses, when we're offering courses, and if we can offer courses differently to make sure that our students are better prepared to take these diploma program courses in 11th and 12th grade year. One of the things that she mentioned is that we're really working hard to ensure that the students have the necessary skills to be successful. Sometimes it's just about students not feeling confident because there may be some gaps in skills, so they're really working hard to develop necessary skills in students to be successful in these advanced courses. One of the pieces that she mentioned that I thought was really interesting, because here in St. Louis Park, at the elementary level and at the middle school level, our students are immersed in the IB learner profile attributes. And one of the things that happens in 9th and 10th grade, because we don't have the middle years program here, she was noticing that that was not something that was being highlighted or celebrated in 9th and 10th grade classes. So she's made a concerted effort to really focus on IB learner profile attributes in the 9th and 10th grade year, just acknowledging students when they're demonstrating those attributes. And she believes that that may be impacting this data positively as well. She shared with me that she and other members of the staff have certainly had to have what she defined as courageous conversations, really interrogating beliefs that adults in this building have about students' ability to be able to be successful in these classes. And one of the pieces that I believe is maybe having some of the most positive impact on the numbers that I just shared with you was this component of student encouragement. And she described that as teachers really being intentional to write letters to kids to make sure that students know that they have the brilliance and capacity to participate in these classes. And of all of these things, that stood out most to me, because what I recognize is that one-to-one relationship, or an adult in our organization expressing confidence in the student's ability to be successful, is certainly a motivating factor in that student taking a risk, or being a risk taker if we put it in IB learner profile attribute language. So that concludes my presentation for this evening, and I will take any questions that you have.
This is going to take a little more thought and analysis, but we've had a couple of administrative transitions at the high school. And then the other thing that happens along with that, when the 9th graders transition from Barb Nelson as their academic advisor to the next cohort, how those adjustments are made and what kind of impact that might be. And that is something I just sent you a note about, Aston, if you would just take a look at that a little more deeply.
No, absolutely. Thank you for the note. And to your point, I'm confident that there are other areas in which we can improve to show, to continue to, increase these numbers in a positive way.
It is great to see the increase thus far. I think that that's really encouraging, and I hope that we can keep things moving in that direction. And thanks, a big thank you to Jenny Magdahl. I completely agree with you that student encouragement piece seems to be so crucial, and I would hope that can be happening at the 5th grade level, for the 5th grade teachers to be talking to their rising middle school students about which classes they should be signing up for, and for our middle school teachers to be continuing to encourage their students to go after those advanced classes, and to I think that there is, from what I heard when my students when my son was transitioning from middle school to the high school, is there's a fear about that transition, right? There's a fear about, high school is going to be overwhelming. We don't know what it's going to be like. It can be intimidating. And I think that some students may shy away from some of the advanced courses going into high school for that reason. And then once you're not in them, I wonder if there is a bigger leap
you know, to sign up for them 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. Like, if it just feels like culturally you're just not doing that, so I'm not going to bother to sign up for them later. So I think that my point here is that all of this work, it's great that it's happening at the high school, but I think it's work that probably needs to be starting in elementary school.
Absolutely. And in the coming, next month, so several months ago, our math design team had an opportunity to share with you all of the work that they were doing and some of the thoughts that they had around really increasing rigor for all students in math. And the focus at that time was really 6-12, but to your point, you know, if we're going to be doing that 6-12, it starts, you know, in preschool, so to speak. And I'm excited for them to come back in January and talk about the work and the pathway that they've created to make sure, to your point, Board Member Tombeck, that our students are developing the confidence at an early age, to when they get to high school, they're not fearful of, you know, our most rigorous courses here in the school district.
On the slide with the number of students passing the exams, this one, I want to just uplift that number, the growth in the percent, but also the growth in the number of exams. And I was thinking about like what that represents for our kids is not only that credit, that exam in high school, but literal money saved when they get to college. So I did a little math of 352 kids exams were passed, and those exams are worth, let's say, 3 credits in a college course, and those credits are $500 a piece at a state school. That's $500,000 worth of credits that our students got last year for those 352 exams. I just think that is a point that is worth remembering and continue to increase that because of that we know that is literally saving our kids money when they get to college.
Absolutely.
Cha-ching.
I agree that it's a great savings, and I'd like to get my kids to go through those classes too. But I, of course, was disturbed by the drop in kids of color on 2018, 2019 of roughly 19% drop, but then rebound the next year to basically the same plateau. It would be great to understand what that is, you know, because if it stay flat as low, and then you can understand the kids are just dropping out of it and not even want to be interested. But there was just a lack of interest for 1 year. I was just kind of wondering if we can dig into that a little bit. And then also, it was encouraging that the amount of class or tests that they are taking, the kids of color are taking, stayed, you know, pretty flat. So, you know, the kids that are engaged in doing the work are continuing. It's just the ones that are trying it, you know, testing the waters. Would be interesting to see if we can continue to get those kids to test the waters and stay with it. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And I apologize about not being prepared this evening to provide some context around the 2018-19 school year. You know, there are just so many variables and factors. It could have been that we were offering courses previously that we didn't offer that year and that we brought back in 1920. I just have to learn more about what that change was. And the great thing is that there is not a shortage of data, so I can certainly, well, I say but Sylvie can help me try to dig in and figure out what happened that year and why we had a decrease.
And I think that's a great point in that we are able to dig into the data and then see what those offerings are, right? Yeah. And if they're good offerings for our kids of color, that will keep interest, and then that's back to allowing all of our kids to have a pathway that is successful.
So, Aston, this is really, thank you for sharing this. There's so many good results there, and I think many of us who've been on the board a while will know that this is not where we've been, and we've got a lot of work to get to the good results we're seeing now, and I'm very happy that we're have more students of color taking those AP and IB classes, because that's what our goal and our work has been towards, so that all students are having multiple pathways to success. I think it's important to Also just remind people that you don't have to be an IB diploma candidate to take an IB class or an AP class, that anybody can take those. And we really encourage that as a way to sort of find out how good you really are, because we believe you're capable. And more of you are capable than may realize it. And so we kind of want you to test your waters and really, find within yourself what you know and maybe what you need to learn to know. And I assume that what we've done, because these results are going in the right direction, is that we're not isolating kids, that we're getting more than one kid taking a class, and one kid of color taking a class alone, that we're finding out a way to help kids not feel isolated as they're testing the waters.
Sure. Yeah, in closing, I was going to have a couple of remarks, and to your point, Chair Gores, while I certainly want us to take a moment and celebrate this data, I think is positive. I by no means am suggesting that we've arrived at a place in which we have created an equitable environment in which every student feels comfortable, accepted, and just loved in their setting. And we've heard from the last couple of years from our students at commencement some of the challenges of being a student of color, the only student of color, or one of a few students of color in these classes, and the impact that it has on them. So while I certainly want us to celebrate the progress, I recognize that we still have a lot of work to do, and it's going to continue to take us to really roll up our sleeves and dig into some of these very difficult challenges that not only we are experiencing, but school districts all around this state and country are experiencing. And the last piece that I wanted to mention connected to this, and I kind of highlighted it before, but as I mentioned MCA scores, and I recognize that is something that oftentimes is the focus of school districts. We're currently working on developing a scorecard here in St. Louis Park, not only for us internally to make sure that we're making progress on the things that we value, but externally as well for our community to know that there are certain areas that we value as it relates to our mission, and we're going to make sure that we do everything we can to allow those areas to be actualized by our students. And I would suggest that this is one way. And I also believe that we have to figure out how to get better participation amongst the MCA tests. Last year, or the last time I looked at the data, we had about 70% of our 11th grade students opt out of the math exam. As you know, students that opt out are they're not proficient, right? So that has a tremendous impact on what people from the outside may see from a proficiency standpoint, but that's not a true representation of who our students are. So we're looking at ways to increase participation so that it's a better reflection of who we are academically here in St. Louis Park.
I just want to clarify one thing that you said. The students that opt out, the 70% that opt out, they may well be proficient.
Absolutely.
But the state kind of categorizes them as not proficient because they didn't take the test.
Absolutely.
And that's our problem.
That's our problem.
That hurts us as a district when people are, evaluating us.
And the challenge with that is that a lot of these tests all happen at the same time. So, for example, if I'm an 11th grader, I'm faced with the MCA, the ACT. As you can see, we have over 4,000 AP and IB, courses being taken, and many tests. So students, they're going to take and put their energy in what's going to get them 3 credits in a college course or whatever it may be. So we're looking at ways to create sequence in these tests to where it would be benefit. Like if I was an 11th grader and I knew if I could take my MCA first, knowing that I had an ACT coming up, I may look at this MCA as a practice opportunity, a free practice opportunity to prepare me for the ACT. So we're really starting to look at ways in which we can sequence these tests to incentivize students to take them. We run into challenges like the timing of all of this. Like this year, I think we're scheduled to do the ACT in February. Well, that's really early, but we're doing it in February because we have a large number of students who take AP and IB tests in March and April, so we're going to figure it out. And I also know that we're going to figure out a way to make sure that we're better represented through the MCA exams that we offer here in St. Louis Park.
And I just want to throw out there for our job as board members and soon to be former board members and incoming board members, that one of the things we can do along with members of our public is talk to our state legislators about the fact that it's I'll climb on my soapbox for just a second, super disingenuous to allow students the opportunity to opt out, but then to count it against the school when they do so. It's just very mixed messaging, and it puts the school in a very difficult position. It can be a challenge for students and families to make these choices. So feel free to contact some folks at the Capitol and ask them to reconsider this untenable position, as my brilliant colleague mentioned. Yeah.
We had two senators from the Education Committee at the last meeting of the Association of Metropolitan School Districts, Senator Clausen and Senator Anderson, two different parties. And based on that conversation, I believe this issue is going to be brought forward sometime this year. So there may well be a good opportunity to advocate for it, for using it, and in particular for you being able to use the ACT as a measure rather than using the MCA.
To say, having only one mic really builds collaboration. Anyone else? Aston, thank you. Unless you want a closing remark on this topic.
That was it.
Nope. Okay. So next up we have policy development, first reading of 545 Park Spanish Immersion Admission Policy. And I don't know who, there are some changes noted here, so I don't know who wants to speak to that. Is that Flower or is that? Yep. Oh. There's one mic. Two. Okay.
Okay, so for policy 545, Park Spanish Immersion Admissions Policy, there were a few changes more in some of the terminology that was previously used. Some of those changes have been highlighted in earlier presentations, including kindergarten roundup now being called kindergarten registration in the policy. Instead of the word lottery, it is now computer-generated admission process. We also made a change to one of the definitions in the policy, the definition for sibling to be a non-binary definition. So instead of just saying brother or sister, a more inclusive definition for the word sibling. So you'll see those changes in policy 545.
I'm just wondering 8C, what that means, if that's supposed to be something different than 8A. I don't know, one who could answer that, but. Yeah, yes. 8C refers to incoming St. Louis Park resident kindergarten schools who have attended school before attending PSI. It's not meant to, like they've attended preschool, or I'm not quite sure what that means.
Just so, just to be, so you can understand what we're describing between 8A and 8C. So Section 8 refers to families who move, and A is referring to St. Louis Park resident students who are attending PSI before their families move out of the district boundaries, and that statement there says those students may remain at school. And then C is referring to incoming St. Louis Park resident kindergarten students who have attended school before their family moves out of the school district, may remain at school. And I think your point is, well, what is the difference between students or kindergartners, because they're both students here in St. Louis Park? Is that your question, Jim? So are you asking, do we need both, or could we just combine them? Because if you're asking, do we need both, I would agree that maybe we don't need both here. Yeah, I believe you might be right there.
can look at that when it comes back on the second read. Okay.
When it comes back for a second read too, I'm wondering if we can do a little bit more in section 3 about defining computer-generated admission. I don't know that a lot of people necessarily will automatically know what that means. I think the word lottery people get, and I understand and respect the desire to ditch the word lottery, but I think that we need a little bit better of a definition then. Maybe we need to include the word random. We need to define what computer-generated admission means.
Yeah, I just wanted to second that. That was my concern too, that just as it is, I think we still intend that it's going to be a chance opportunity, but nobody knows that based on what this says, and I think it's important that we find a way to communicate that.
We can certainly look at the definition. We moved away from the word lottery. We received feedback that some didn't appreciate the word lottery because it, suggested there were winners and losers as it related to acceptance into Park Spanish Immersion. Therefore, we moved. We shifted the language, but I certainly understand the need for further definition around then what does that mean? Because to your point, right, people, regardless of how they feel about it, understand what a lottery is. So we can look at that.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Also, before that second read, I'd just like kind of all of us to think about the presentation we heard earlier about our enrollment and how if this process and this policy are serving its desired purpose. I wasn't on the board when this policy was enacted or changed. I guess it was changed in 2010. Is that right? It says the last revision was in 2010. So that's a long time to go between thinking about whether this is serving what it is intended to do. So I just like to kind of think about that data and maybe dig into that a little bit more.
So, and I will tell you my memory of the major change, and I don't know if it was the only change, but my memory of the major change in 2010 was to add this provision for 20 seats being held for free and reduced lunch students and to hold them until we were closer to the start of school, on the theory that some families that are perhaps economically struggling, if that's what free and reduced lunch tells you, may not be paying as much attention as the well-off families are earlier in the process. And so we wanted to make that a more equitable opportunity. And we've had some success in terms of looking at the percentage of free and reduced lunch being up to 17%. We struggled for years to get it into double digits. And the change in this policy did do that. I haven't seen I don't recall the trend data on that, so I can't, and I don't know if we said we maybe didn't need as much data this time around in the review, but maybe we will. So you all who are continuing on the board can decide what you want to do about that. But that's my memory of why the change was made, and it did accomplish some of our purpose at the time.
Okay, I am just going to add a little bit of something because I was not on the board at the time of this one, but I was a Aquila parent, and we enjoyed the opportunity that others, people of less means, could have the opportunity to get into the school because at the time it seemed like if you had the means you can get into the school. So I'm just putting it out there, and that was nice to have out there when it was. It would be great to be taken more advantage of, use the whole 20 seats. But if it's not, then we really need to fill the school. So I understand what it is, and I too would like to see more data on that one, how we're doing, how we're changing on it, and how those.
And Jim and I were both on the, Jim Beneke and I, on the Equity and Excellent Task Force and the subsequent Expand Immersion Task Force. And Immersion actually was not expanded, but it reflected a desire that we wanted all of our schools to reflect our community. And by holding space for families, that piece of the policy has worked to make it more accessible for more people, especially kids of color. I think it's a policy that needs a deeper look and dive, especially as our overall demographics have changed quite a bit. When you look at the overall changes, our schools demographics have changed faster than our city demographics, and it is important to dive deep into what else we could be doing to support choices for all of our students, again, for multiple pathways of excellence. Immersion is not the right option for everybody. It wasn't a choice that my family wanted to make because I wanted to be a classroom volunteer and I was not fluent in Spanish. But I could help out at Peter Hobart and Susan Lindgren on a weekly basis because they didn't need me to be fluent in Spanish. So just as things have changed over time, this one is worth a deeper dive, but that was kind of the rationale, and it came out of that work way back when with Deborah Bowers, and we had some enrollment issues, we had funding issues for sure. There were other things that were going to be cut at the time. Recall we were talking about cutting German and French at the middle school, and certainly art was on the cutting block. So it's and again, we got to look at this through our lens of racial equity in a much more purposeful way.
Yeah, I think it's probably worth another discussion. I think I've heard of parents who apply for free and reduced lunch just to get into PSI, even if they probably wouldn't have otherwise. So I don't know if there's any other kind of barometer of what we're trying to accomplish that we could use. So if I'm not here, yeah, it might be worth another discussion. I remember the other recent change. When did we do it? We used to have it so the sibling policy, even if they did move out, siblings would still get preference. And I think that was a change made in recent history to free up more room for residents.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. You can apply for free and reduced lunch, but you have to qualify for it. It's not just a matter of who's applied, Jim. It's a matter of having qualified. So, and that's a federal, requirement. And to your, just as a little history, just because I'm going off, I'll just say the balance, as I recall, was 20 seats for free and reduced lunch students to try to have a more representative school community that reflected our community, honoring sibling preference, which is built into statutory preferences and is sort of historic, and then having opportunities for enough, quote, new families to come into the school. And so there was that balancing that was being done back in the day that, this is sort of how we ended up where we were in 2010. If that doesn't make any sense, you know how to reach me.
So I'm leaving the board too, so this may not matter too much, but I think what everyone's asking for a deeper dive into this, that's what we used to get every single year. So I think this board going forward will have to decide whether or not they're going to go back to what Linda Stanley was doing, where she had a extremely extensive presentation or chunk of data that she sent out to the board showing a lot more of the history and how things have moved over time, or maybe there's some sort of happy medium where you're not going that deep into it, but you're getting a bit more of the history and a bit more of the details there. But the future chair, whoever that is, can decide along with the new board, what they want to get out of this, because this is the first year we've kind of moved to a little bit less data, but what I've heard from several of you is you want more data. So Just what I'm telling you is pick something and go with it. That's my sage advice to all of you.
And if you're going to dig deeper and have more, and whatever the discussion or issues are, I know this board will have a very public process because there'll be interest.
Maybe just to clarify my earlier comments, I didn't mean to imply that anyone can just get free and reduced lunch. I'm just wondering if there's other standards that could apply, just besides whether you apply for free and reduced lunch or not, and I'm not sure what those would be.
So that was the first read, and now we're going to move on to policy development, the second read of policy 706. Does anybody have any comments on that? Okay, then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda that someone would like taken off for discussion? All right, seeing none. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Oh, moved by Ken, seconded by Karen. All in favor? Aye. Carries 7-0. Next up is the action agenda. First up is the employment agreement aquatics supervisor. I assume we're going to hear from Rick on this.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Superintendent, this is not a new position. It's just reclassifying a position that we've had for a number of years. Kathy Taylor has been the aquatics supervisor, the aquatics instructor, the lifeguard, the everything aquatics, and she runs the budget and hires the people and does the whole programming for our aquatics program through community education. And we looked at the number of hours that she was working, and it seemed not an efficient use to be paying her as a temporary seasonal employee on a voucher. And so what we've done is looked at the number of hours she works and the amount of money she was paid and fashioned that into a part-time position so that she would be recognized as a regular active employee, the badge, the status, the access to benefits. So that's the change. It's not a new position, but it's a recharacterization from temporary seasonal to an active regular employee. Yeah. Does it? The question was, does it change the cost to the district? It does change the cost, not in salary, but in some benefits. And the Community Education Department had built that in last year, in anticipating this move, and so it's in their budget for what this position would have.
I will add that in addition to all of the tasks that Rick described Kathy is performing, she also does a great job of teaching Tomback children how to swim. So.
Well, in the land of 10,000 lakes, I think it's really good for all children to learn how to swim, so I'm glad we have someone helping here. I would like to ask Aston, because it has a larger budget implication, are you and Patricia in support of this?
Yeah, and we are in support, and as Rick mentioned, this is a position funded out of the community education budget, and there was provisions made in the budgeting process last year to accommodate this change and additional benefits that Kathy Taylor will be receiving.
Any other comments, questions? All right. It is recommended that the school board approve the employment agreement between Independent School District number 283 and Catherine Taylor as aquatics supervisor as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I'm going to give that to Ann as the mover and Mary as the second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries 7-0. Next up, we have a polling place resolution. It is recommended that the school board approve the resolution establishing combined polling places for multiple precincts and designating hours during which the polling places will remain open for voting for school district elections that are not held on the day of a statewide election as presented. And who would like to present on that?
So for this resolution, we did confirm with the city that we no longer have the combined polling places, and really it's like Chair Gores just mentioned, it's really for elections, any special elections that the school board would need to hold this next year. So outside of the general elections, if we need to hold a school board election, these are the polling places and the hours that the polls would be open.
Anybody have any questions? I'm going to assume that if that ever happened, we would find some way to publicize to people where these polling places are, if there's any difference. And I will just say for the record, that's the lawyer in me, couldn't resist it, that our communications director is nodding yes.
And these locations will be sent to the county auditor as well, so they will be public record.
And the locations, Flora says, will be sent to the county auditor and be a part of the public record. Right. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Oops, sorry. I didn't get the motion or the second first. Let me back up once. Is there a motion? Moved by Jim. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ken on this polling place resolution. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 7-0. Next up, we have the final levy certification. It is recommended that the school board approve the 2018 final levy certification as presented. We had the truth and taxation hearing earlier before this official meeting started, and the final levy certification is a 1.6% increase. Oh, is it the 2020 final? Is it the 2020 final levy certification? Okay. So we're to approve the final levy certification for taxes payable in 2020? Is that correct? Okay. Right. So that's the motion. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Karen. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mary. Any discussion? Right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carries 7-0. Next up, we have approval of the 2020-2021 school calendar. It is recommended that the school board approve the 2020-2021 school calendar as presented. And as presented is the calendar that has us not holding school for students on the Monday and Tuesday of election week in 2020, but having other, I forget what the events were for staff, but PD for staff. Right. Is there a motion? Moved by Ken. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mary. Is there any discussion? And this is the 2020-2021 calendar. Is there any discussion?
I think the board should get several more iterations of this before voting on it. No, I again, over the years, I've really appreciate Rick and his team's process for getting these calendars done and taking into account so many different stakeholders. It's really a lot of moving parts and just a great job by Rick and the team. So.
I'd like to second that, and I sort of don't love not having school on election day, but this is a good recommendation, and I want to acknowledge that this is what was recommended, and that I think we talked about this last time, but I just wanted to say I think this is it seems to be a not too consequential move to just move these days at the beginning of November. So I'm for it.
2020 is the year of the next presidential election, and this is a test drive, and we can see how it works, and the board can do what it wants in the future calendar discussions, because there will be many, I am sure. Right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Well, Rick, the calendar carries 7-0. Thank you very much.
When will we see 2022, 2023?
Right.
You may get in January when we bring back the.
That's right.
So next up, we have approval of a second reading of policy 706, acceptance of donation and gifts. It is recommended that the school board approve the second reading of policy 706, acceptance of donation and gifts as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Karen. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mary. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Carries 7-0. Next, we are up to communications and transmittals.
Let's see. Today is Monday, December 9th. On Wednesday, December 11th, the holiday train is coming through near the high school. It's a step event, so you can bring donations of food or money. I've heard it's a great event. It's going to be brutally cold on Wednesday, but bear with it. It's a great community event.
There's one last opportunity for a concert before the holidays, at least one I know of. On Thursday, December 19th at 7, the high school have their orchestra alumni concert. It's one my daughter has participated in as an alumni in the past. She won't be doing it this year, but I still probably will be there. So.
I think it was last year that we had the students from the middle school play come and do a little advertisement, and they're not here today, but their play is this week. They're doing the Stinky Cheese Man and Other Fairly Stupid Tales. It is sort of like the Gingerbread Man, but stinkier. And the songs that have been going on in my house are very much in that vein. And they are doing their play Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They take this thing seriously. 7 o'clock Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and 1 o'clock on Sunday in the high school auditorium. So look for Miss Nina Casey Fix as the old lady who created the Stinky Cheese Man.
All right, anybody else? All right, it has been a pleasure, everybody. I think I can speak for both Jim and Joe and me. It has been a pleasure. Thank you all. Right. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Ann. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Joe. All in favor? Aye. Carries 7-0.